The following program is not in any way, shape, or form related to John Green or his Crash Course History Online. My name is Connor, and welcome back to another episode of Mini Crash Course, where our motto is, we're not as good as John Green. In today's episode, we're going to be focusing on a major part of European history. This era is known as the Renaissance. The Renaissance was first beginning to be developed in Florence, Italy, where they started discovering new architecture and new writings from old Greek and Roman texts. This was mainly due to the expansion of Florence's population in Italy during the 13th and 14th century. This expansion of population obviously caused newer, bigger towns to be built, thus allowing Italians to explore new architecture and being able to build new buildings. Now, why Italy? Why is Italy's population expanding so much more than most other European cultures at the time? Now, this is because that other European cultures, they were raising livestock during the time of the Middle Ages. They were shipping a whole lot of wool into Italy for trading purposes, trying to get their money back up to where it used to be before the fall of the Middle Ages. And Italians were very skilled craftsmen. These people were providing raw materials for many Italians who were skilled craftsmen, as I said, to turn it into better cloths that they could then resell. A lot of this wealth funded the construction of many buildings that were in Florence, all the new architectural styles. This was providing many architects with enough money that they needed to build the bigger, better ideas that they were being inspired by from the Greeks and the Romans. Thus, mainly in Florence, because that's where a lot of the wool was going, they were able to focus all their resources into building these massive buildings that would eventually be so admired today. While we're focusing on Italian cities right now, Florence was a republic that was founded mainly upon the many wealthy families that were in charge of running the various businesses and overseeing the businesses in Florence. During the 15th century, many families, they increased their political power in these cities, thus taking over its political structure, however, not completely getting rid of the republic altogether. During all this trade and producing and stuff, money's being made. A lot of people are getting rich off of this, and mainly it's the wealthy families. So these wealthy families, they decided to surround themselves in art. This was a new thing in the Renaissance, was if you had a lot of art, then you were considered more wealthy, you were upper class. It was, so to say, cool to have art in your house. And having art in your house, because mainly it was in church in past years, in the past hundreds of years, it was considered more individualistic. It was considered more classical for people to actually have art in their houses as opposed to just being hung up in churches or in public areas. Now, there were some architectural things that were being built in the medieval times, however, overlapped into the Renaissance, and you can see where the differences lie. Certain buildings were built in the medieval time, whereas certain parts of other buildings were built in the Renaissance, and you can sort of see that the bases of some buildings in Florence and many other European and Italian, specifically Italian cities, they have a higher part that's Renaissance, whereas the lower part, the foundation that was laid years earlier, was medieval. Going along with these structures, new cathedrals, new churches were being built because of this new style of the Renaissance. Many people wanted to have their churches built like these. And as you know, one of the churches in Florence was actually built over 130 feet wide, and then they wanted to put a dome over it. And no one was up to the challenge of making this dome except for Brunelleschi. Brunelleschi then comes up with this ingenious idea to put a dome within a dome in order to support the overall dome. There's a lot of domes in there. Filippo Brunelleschi was an architect that had made the pilgrimage to Rome to study many of the architectural designs that the Romans had created. And he measured their proportions so that he would be able to get his dome right in the Italian city. Thus, returning to Florence with his newfound information, he created an amazing dome that everybody would admire for hundreds of years to come. Going back in time another 100 years before Brunelleschi was Giotto, and he was one of the first painters in the Renaissance. He was mainly known for making advances in making humans look more realistic in painting. After being set in motion, art sort of snowballed. Many other painters started taking up this idea to try to create new forms of art. After Giotto, there were three main painters that most people think about from the Renaissance. And these people are Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and Raphael. And they were all part of one great painting era called the High Renaissance. Leonardo was known as sort of the perfect Renaissance man. He was very into architecture. He had invented various objects. He was a painter. He was a sculptor. He did everything. He was even a literary genius, some consider. So it's no surprise that he was considered the perfect Renaissance man. Two of his most famous works that you might recognize are The Last Supper and Mona Lisa. This shows his ability to show light and shadow and humans and animals interacting with inanimate objects in paintings that most considered genius for the time. Michelangelo took on Leonardo's humanistic paintings and tried to expand on them, try to make larger sculptures out of some of them. He produced works such as the Pieta from the St. Peter's Cathedral or the David. Although Michelangelo was mainly known for being a sculptor, he also achieved very great heights in painting. Literally. Completed over 4 years, Michelangelo himself painted the entire ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. I know, pretty crazy, right? Most of us can't stand to draw on like one of those tiny pieces of paper, let alone on this huge ceiling. And lastly, we get to the young Raphael. Raphael took on both Leonardo and Michelangelo and tried to use a lot of their aspects in his painting. His most famous painting is known as the School of Athens. And a lot of people kind of coincide the Renaissance with people not believing in God so much, people becoming less religious, trying to be more down to earth, as the kids say it now. Not really. However, there were still many works that occurred in the Renaissance that were very religious, such as the David. People painted the Madonna, they painted the Virgin Mary, they painted Jesus. Many of these religious figures were still being painted at this time. And Renaissance artists actually came from all parts of society. All you had to do was get a master to teach you how to paint, and you could really just be on your way. People who were considered the middle class in Italy were also trying to buy paintings for their own house to try to seem to raise their status, try to make themselves seem more wealthy and seem higher in society than they actually were. So in these paintings, they showed more domestic themes such as family and getting together, being in a household, such stuff like that, as opposed to the extreme religious works of some other parts of the Renaissance, which kind of shows that religious works were sort of in decline. However, they were still there. It's not like religion was completely gone in the Renaissance. Now, similar to Crash Course, although I'm not Crash Course, let's write a letter to one of my favorite Renaissance men. Although, he's not really my favorite, because you can tell by this letter. Anyway, Dear Leonardo da Vinci, or should I just call you Leo? I'll call you Leonardo da Vinci. Why did you have to be such an accomplished man? You were perfect. You had architecture, you invented some cool things, you painted, heck, you even philosophized. Now my mom holds me to such high standards. She says I should be the perfect Renaissance man just like you. You are so amazing, my mom wants me to be just like you. Isn't that great? Not great for me. Anyway, I'm sure you have to get back to painting Lisa del Giocondo. Has she smiled yet? Have fun inventing the first helicopter. Yours truly, Connor from MCC. That stands for Mini Crash Course, and I'm not Crash Course.
But you are not Kevin Love.
So that's all the time we have here today on Mini Crash Course. If you enjoyed, leave a like. Maybe I'll do more of these episodes in the future. And say hi to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for me. No, it's not just a coincidence that they're named after famous Renaissance men. They're just cool like that. Bye.